Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the Byword Show. I am so excited because today we are kicking off a brand new mini series, How to Talk to Your Kids About. Listen, I know as parents, in today's culture and society, in this world that we are living in, comes with its own set of challenges, especially when it comes to having tough but necessary conversations about important topics, whether it's discussing faith, identity, technology, or anything in between. My heart in this series is really just to equip you with the tools and insights you need to navigate these discussions with confidence and grace. So, in this series, we've got some incredible guests. We've even got some faces returning from past episodes, and they have so much wisdom to share with us as we dive into these topics, offering practical advice, biblical wisdom, everything we need to guide our kids through some of life's most complex issues. My hope more than anything is that through these episodes, you'll feel more prepared to foster open, honest, and faith filled conversations with your kids, no matter what the subject is. But more than anything, what you're going to hear in this series is that more is caught than taught. So we can talk to our kids all day long about these things, but really what it comes down to is what they're observing from us as their parents. And I hope that doesn't put pressure on you. I hope that doesn't make you feel like you have to have it perfect. In fact, in this episode you're about to listen to with Chantelle Nelson, she even points out that the research shows if we can at least get it right 50% of the time, we are making a huge difference in our kids' lives. So more than anything, it's just about modeling. It's about living it out for ourselves and laying the foundation for our kids to grow up in an environment where these are the things that are normal. These are the things that we value as a family and as people of God. So I really hope that you enjoy this series. I hope that you will share it with other parents in your life. I've had so much fun getting to have these conversations with all these incredible guests. And I am just praying for you as you tune in weekly to these episodes on Mondays that you will feel so confident and so capable to parent these kids that God has chosen you to steward and raise. We got this, mamas. Let's dive in. I have just had so many conversations with the mamas in this community. And, it can be hard. Like, we talk a lot about these topics on the show for ourselves. And, it's hard enough to just kind of figure out these things with our faith and purpose as our own individual, person. But then talking about them with our kids is a whole other story. So I'm really excited to have my friends here to talk to us about how to discuss these things with our kids. And today we're kicking off this series with my friend Chantelle Nelson, who you may remember from episode 41 of the show. I am so glad you're back, Chantelle. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's an honor to be back. I love what you do. I love the community that you create. You are somebody who when I was thinking about you, I'm like, you're such a wholehearted woman, like just in all
Aww.
areas of your life, just wanting to do things really well. And there's so much excellence and thought in every single thing that you do. So I just feel honored to be here.
Thank you, friend. I feel the same about you. And you guys, I have just loved all the conversations I've had with Chantelle through the years. Like, she was on the show, and then we did one of our little monthly workshops with her as well. And she is just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to emotions and mental health and all kinds of things. So today, what we're going to be talking about is how to talk to our kids about emotions and mental health. So, Chantelle, what do you think is the biggest thing moms need to know when it comes to talking to our kids about these things?
I think it's not so much what we need to know, it's probably more about what we need to do, which is model it. I think
Mm.
we sometimes think that what we say is the most important thing to our kids when really it's not. It's what we do. And I've experienced this firsthand when my son calls me out on things that I say that we're not supposed to do, like say the H word, which is hate. Um, or just say different things, and then he'll call me out on it, and I realize, oh, it's not about what I say. It's about, am I actually backing up what I say with what I'm doing? And so I think when it comes to emotions, we first have to model them and show our kids how to do emotions. And I was literally just talking to a client today she was talking about how she doesn't think her husband has any of them. And I was like, he probably does, but he just himself hasn't learned how to actually be in touch with them in a way where he can actually communicate them, because emotions is really, they're a language. And if we don't understand how to actually communicate that language, then we're going to feel really stuck. Our connections with each other are going to be really shallow. And I think research shows that the average adult human being is able to pull out two emotion words. Oh, three: happy, sad, mad. And if you think about language, how how much we need our words to actually communicate our experience. And when you think about emotions, if we only have access to 3 words, which is happy, sad, and mad, there is so much more to the human experience than just being happy or sad or mad. But if we don't have the language of emotion, then like I said, just we're going to be really shallow in our connections, and we're going to feel really just stuck when it comes to trying to describe our experience or our pain or where people got it wrong or our hurt. And so I think the biggest thing parents, moms, people need to know is, how can you first get access to and learn how to communicate your emotions so that your kids just naturally pick it up along the way, just like language.
That's such a good point. And I think that's huge because so many of the parents in our generation, at least several that I've talked to in my circle in real life, grew up in this era where it was kind of
Yes.
taught that you just need to be okay. Like fake it till you make
Yes.
it, put on a happy face, like you're going to be fine. I remember even as I got older and started dealing with some mental health things, I just remember my dad being like, have a better attitude. And I was
Right.
like,
Right.
what? Like, and the thing is, like, I know our parents do the best they can with what they
Yeah.
know, but it's so interesting now that these kids who were taught to suppress emotions are now the parents and figuring
Yes.
out how to navigate our own feelings. And then we have these little kids who are trying to figure it
Yeah.
out as well. That's such an interesting dichotomy.
Yes. I know. Because do you ever find yourself even just saying the things in your head that you always learned growing up? Because sometimes when my kids are taking so long to process through something, or they feel disappointed about something and it just takes so long to get through it, you just want to yell, like, just suck it up, just figure it out. It's not a big deal. But of course, I don't
Right.
say those things. But I think them. I'm like, just get over it. It's not a big deal, because we're looking at it from our adult perspective that it's not a big deal. But that's not empathy. Empathy is being able to resonate with the emotion that they're feeling, whether we understand it or not, but being able to find inside of ourselves a time when we felt embarrassed, disappointed, hurt, let down. And even though from our kids' perspective, we might not resonate with that particular experience, but we ourselves know what embarrassment or pain or sadness or rejection feels like. And so it's our job, for lack of a better word, to be able to resonate with that emotion ourselves, so then we can then attune to them in that emotion. But there's so many times when I want to just say, I mean, and I think even more than being raised by boomer parents who just said, suck it up, stop crying, figure it out. It was more so the subliminal messaging of, because
Mm,
I didn't particularly grow up with parents who were very verbal about the fact that I couldn't express emotion. There was just no space for emotion and hard things to come up, because
mm.
again, that's why I say modeling is the most important part, because what we model, like kids literally learn through modeling and observation. But I never observed pain or sadness or grief or insecurity in my parents. And so I just subconsciously assumed there's no space for my pain and my sadness and my harder emotions. And so I just shut all of those down, even though nothing was consciously or verbally communicated to me. Don't feel that way, or don't be that way.
Yeah, and that's so interesting when you become the parent, and
Hmm.
even like that client you said whose husband it seems like just doesn't feel anything. I mean, especially with boys who are taught
Yeah.
that emotions are showing weakness, or
Yeah.
real men don't cry, suck it up, like even more of that on the masculine side of things. Like, how do we as adults start to relearn that language of emotions in the midst of helping our kids
Hmm.
start to get language for their feelings as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes we have to follow our kids' lead on this, because
Mm,
they are in tune with their emotions, and they're not trying to shut anything down until we teach them that they need to shut things down. I mean, I remember when I was learning emotions, we had my husband and I, we learned it together in marriage counseling, but we just had this paper card with all these emotion words on it. And anytime we got into an argument, we would pull out the card and then we would try to identify what we felt. And it was just learning the language of emotion. In the same way that you would learn a different language, you actually have to pull up the words and you have to use them in your everyday language, and you have to get it wrong. I think there's just this, whether it's an assumption or a belief or a standard that we set, that we have to do it perfectly. I mean, even myself as a helping professional, don't resonate perfectly with a client's emotion, and I'm not meant to. It's, we try, we make an attempt, and then they're the ones who can say, I actually don't feel angry. I actually think I feel sad. And so
Mm,
we have to be vulnerable, and it takes a lot of courage to learn a language that we've never learned before, especially in adulthood when we've just kind of shut that down for so long. It takes courage to actually begin to identify feelings and experiences and emotion inside of ourselves that we have just spent so many years pushing away or putting on a mask, or just saying things like, it's not a big deal, I'm fine, let's just keep moving, when really there's
yeah.
locked up emotion. Like, but when those experiences and those expressions of pain, joy, sadness, grief, excitement, when those are shut down for so long, because sometimes our parents shut down the positive ones too, like extreme
Mm,
joy and extreme excitement, like stop being too much, don't make people feel uncomfortable. And so when those are shut down
mm,
for so long, they get suppressed and they get locked away. And so it's our job to kind of go on a journey of discovering and reawakening those emotions and those experiences that we have shut down. And so, I mean, I definitely
mm.
went on this journey with my kids in identifying emotion, and we would keep a little feeling wheel on our fridge. And it's how my
I love
firstborn
that.
learned emotions. It was like anytime he would feel something, he would run to the fridge and like grab this wheel and then point to the, it had like emojis on it. And he would point to the emoji that he felt. And then we would talk about that emotion and what he felt, what that means. And I mean, I even think sometimes I do this a lot with my kids through play. They're learning the language, right? They don't have, they might know what it feels like, but they don't actually know the word and the process attached to that emotion. And so sometimes through play, if my kids have like a meltdown or a fit, or they have a really big attitude about something and I can't process it in real time, because again, their brains aren't fully developed, and so they don't have the ability to put 1 + 2 = 3 together sometimes. And so
Mm,
we try and do it from a very rational, logical, right, left brain kind of a way. But oftentimes I, through play later on, we bring up that same scenario with like little guys
mm.
that we're playing with, and we this little guy yelled at his mom because he didn't get his way, and then we kind of play it out. And I make it sound like I'm just this really hippie granola crunchy play mom. I'm like, play is actually really, really, really hard for me, but I actually thrive in these kind of situations where I can help them process emotion through play. And they
Mm,
actually are really good problem solvers and really good processors when it comes to doing it through play. Those are a couple of ways I think that we can learn alongside of our kids. And they're just really great leaders in this area because they're just unhinged. They're not protected. They're not shut down. They're just, they are what they are and they feel what they feel. And how can we as adults and the responsible person in the room face our own stuff, and instead of projecting it out onto them and doing the same things
mm.
that our parents did to us.
Yeah, that's such a good point, and I know you perfectly just brought up an example. I was going to ask like what are some of the ways that you do create that space, but I wanted to point out how you said it's like vulnerable. It can
So
be
vulnerable.
uncomfortable
Yes.
creating that space for your kids to feel it out when you were taught like let's move on. What does that look like for you creating space for your kids to feel while also keeping your own emotions in check? Does that make sense?
Mm.
Like how do
Yes.
we how do
Yes.
we keep ourselves from getting triggered and overwhelmed and like reacting in those
Yes.
moments of big feelings with our kids?
Oh man, I think that's like the hardest. I mean, being a parent, you know this, it's so humbling because you
Yeah.
constantly see where you fall short all the time, where you're still
Mm,
insecure, where you're still have stuff to work through, where you still get triggered. Like I can get really triggered when there's big emotion in my kids.
mm,
It makes me feel really powerless. It makes me feel really out of control, which then makes me want to have power over them and be in control of them, which is
mm,
never good. Anytime you get into that power dynamic, like then you're just fighting against each other and nobody's actually winning and moving towards connection. My son, he's 7 now, but when he was probably like 2.5 or 3, anytime because he was in that like meltdown era, right? Where they're just, everything is
mm,
a meltdown. They want this color instead of that color. And it's like this big deal. I'm just a very rational, logical thinker. I have to kind of lean into emotion and vulnerability. That's something that I've really built over the last 10 years. But I can tend to just go to, that doesn't make sense. I don't understand why you're so mad at this, like why you're melting down
mm.
because you got the green instead of the blue. Like that literally makes no sense. But again, empathy, or as my kids call it, empathy, because they can't say empathy. Empathy is not resonating and attuning to the situation, but to the emotion behind it. So I can find a time in my life where I felt like I didn't get what I wanted. And what did that feel like for me? It wasn't a blue cup over a green cup, but it was like I didn't get the job that I had fought for and that I really wanted. How can I actually resonate with that experience in myself so that I can connect to that emotion in my kids? But I think that takes so much work. Like it takes so much work inside of ourselves. And I think it takes a lot of humility too, and
Mm.
intentionality, because as parents, like we're busy enough as it is. The last thing that we probably want to do when we're trying to get outside of the house is to deeply attune and resonate with this moment when we just are trying to get out of there and just keep moving the day along.
Right.
But when my 7-year-old was little, I wasn't good at this. Like I didn't have this awareness, and I had started to do a lot of work on myself, but it was kind of just the beginning. And so when he would have these meltdowns, he would call out in me, he would say, "Don't make that face." And I never knew what he was
Mm.
talking about. And I was just trying to move on. And I would ask him, like, what face? And he would make this face where like his lips were pursed, but he would still be smiling. And I realized that I would make this face like I was pretending like I was okay and that I was still connected to him, but I had removed my heart from him altogether. Like I had
Mm.
disconnected, I had pulled away, I had shut down, and he felt my distance. He helped me kind of learn and lean in. Like I can't actually afford to let my triggers and my lack of being able to manage me, because his emotion and his emotional resilience and intelligence and awareness actually depends on me teaching him. And when I pull away and
Mm.
disconnect, he gets scared. And then he feels like, oh, I actually can't be this way in front of mom. When I am a
Wow.
mess, when I melt down, she pulls away and she disconnects from me. And so I can't be that way. And so then he shuts down a part of himself that makes him. And this is what I mean, we know the flip side of this, of just shut down emotion, not really in touch or in tune with our own emotions, because again,
Yeah.
there wasn't a space from our parents. And like I said, it's not always spoken, it's just subconscious, just the environment that is created with me pulling away and shutting down and him feeling that distance. But we as kids were so aware and in tune with connection that we feel the distance. And so I think, one, do your own work. Like if you are getting triggered by your kids all the time, you feel really angry at them, you feel like you're pulling away and shutting down, obviously you have some work to do in and of yourself, because it's not your kids' job to protect you from themselves, you know?
Mm.
And it's
Yeah.
our job to work on ourselves, to heal those places in our own lives so that we're not showing up perfectly. We're going to get it wrong. And I think our generation has kind of pendulum swung to the other side, where we're like, I have to be perfect. I have to be super emotionally
Mm.
intelligent and aware and in tune. I can't have like a misfire on attunement. Like I have to be there and connected and present all the time. Like I feel that this is my struggle. I'm like, is my misfire on how I attune to them gonna end them up in therapy one day? Like, is that gonna be my fault? And so I think we've
Mm.
pendulum swung so far to the other side. But I think doing our own work is such a big part of it. But I think also I learned this in my own coaching journey, getting my own therapy, is realizing that I'm a person too. And sometimes we don't just get to be the place where they fire all of their emotions at us and we just have to take the hits for it. Yes, we have
Mm.
to be the responsible grown up and hold space for them, but we also have to let them know, like, I'm a person too. And when you
Right.
yell at me and hit me and scratch me because you're angry, that makes my heart feel sad. And I think I spent a lot of time trying to build up their emotional capacity and their emotional resilience, that I kind of removed myself out of the picture. And I almost had to like
Mm.
bring myself back in. Like, yes, there's space for your emotion. Yes, there's room for you to be angry and sad, but this is also how your emotional experience affects other people as well. I'm saying all this and I feel like I'm making it really complicated, but I think, one, do your own work. Two, have a lot of grace for yourself. I think a lot of connection with our kids comes from getting it wrong. Like, I think a lot of
Mm.
the connection that I have with my kids comes from me losing it or shutting down and then going into their room later and being like, hey, that wasn't okay. It wasn't okay when mommy
Mm.
just told you to stop talking, or I pulled away from you. You probably felt me disconnect from you. Did you feel that? How did that make you feel? I'm so sorry that I pulled away from you. I was feeling really, really overwhelmed, but that's not your fault. That's not your responsibility. That's mine.
Mm.
And I think it builds a lot of trust with them when they can see us be human and make mistakes and get it wrong, because I don't want to be the perfect parent, because then one day they're going to have the perfect spouse that attunes to their
Mm.
emotions just perfectly every single time. They always get it right and they never get it wrong. Like, I actually have to set them up for real life, and real life is people get it wrong. We make mistakes, we hurt each other, and we have to make those repairs. And I think a lot of trust building happens not in the getting it right, but in the getting it wrong, but making the repair.
That's so good, especially when it comes to, like we have so many people in our generation as well who struggle with this idea of God as a father because they
Mm-hmm.
experience, emotional disconnect with their own parents. And how beautiful is it that we get to model
Yeah.
reconciliation with our
Yeah.
kids, restoration and relationships. And it does take that level of humility. I mean, there are times when I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, I screwed
Yes.
that one up.
Yep.
But it's so true. Like the connection that comes with the repair and the
Yeah.
restoration is really what makes the relationship so much stronger. And I love how you said it really makes them feel safe. It builds that trust, because
Yeah.
I feel like that's one of the best things that modeling, it sounds like one of the best things that modeling does for our kids when it comes to emotions is just giving them permission to feel it and process it in a safe place with us as their
Yeah.
parents, rather than, stuffing it down and then one day exploding, or, ending up
Yeah.
in therapy later down the line feeling like I've never had anyone validate my feelings or give me permission to talk about this. So I
Yeah.
think that's really a really special way that we can model is in the restoration. I think that's such a great point. I'm
Yeah.
curious, are there ways that you teach your kids about managing their emotions or navigating them in a healthy way? I know you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned the emotion wheel. That's such a good
Mm-hmm.
idea. Are there other
Yeah.
things that you recommend?
Yeah. We talk about emotions all the time, not just when somebody is really, really sad or really, really mad or whatever, but we're always using the language of emotion. Like, even with my daughter, she's 20 months now. And so she doesn't have the biggest verbal language yet, but I am teaching her the language of emotion anytime she gets frustrated or her brothers take something from her. And, little kids, they just like scratch her. Like, she's in this thing where when she doesn't get what she wants, she just like scratches the person who offended her. And so I use those opportunities as like, are you mad? Did that make you angry? Are you sad? Are you
Mm,
frustrated? Did that feel like a bummer? Like, or are you so excited? Like, aren't you so excited to see your brothers? Like, we use the language of emotion all the time, just in our daily life. And I've realized this from my son. Like, I have three, and he is so emotionally aware. Like, and I realized this one
mm,
time when I was trying to reflect back something that he said, or I was kind of maybe reprimanding him for something that happened. And he said, this was when he was like 3.5. And he said, no, mom, you misunderstood me. And I realized, like, the
wow.
fact that he understands what it means and what it feels like to be misunderstood is just like a little check mark in my box of like, all right, we're
Yeah.
doing we're doing all right here. We're not perfect parents by any means, but we're teaching them just that emotion is there all the time. And I think the thing about emotion is it's just really messy. Like, you don't just have
Mm,
like a good day and a bad day. You can go through joy, excitement, expectation, curiosity, grief, sadness, devastation, disappointment, all these things, like, all throughout the day. And they're not like a roller coaster. Like, if you're in a roller coaster space, like, you probably need some help kind of like honing in those big expressions of emotion. All throughout our day, we kind of go through this like ebb and flow. Like, it's just like this
mm,
just ebb and flow, like ups and downs. Like, I get disappointed here because I get this text. I get excited because I get this opportunity, or I have a great moment with my kids, and then they throw a fit the next. And it's like we're kind of ebbing and flowing all throughout the day. And resilience is the ability to be able to hold space for that and to be able to bounce back after a moment and not get either taken out and sucked down by it, or not just like get angry and explosive and just yell at
mm,
everybody. Like, we actually have to be able to create space in our life to experience the ups and downs and the highs and lows and the ebbs and flows that just is life. And so we talk about emotion all the time. I use lots of times when we watch shows or movies, like, I ask my kids questions. I probably won't be able to do this when they're teenagers because that's just annoying. I'll like make sounds while we're watching the movie, like, oh, and both of them will look at me and be like, what? And I'll be like, oh, that's really sad that that guy got left out, that he didn't get invited to the birthday party. And then we just have like a little conversation about it and then we move on. But I like engage
Mm.
emotion just when we're watching TV shows because they can just kind of sit there and be checked out and watch a storyline, or I can just use it as an opportunity to kind of engage emotion and curiosity in the felt experience. And I think it also creates empathy inside of them too, when they're not just observers of an experience, but they're like active participants, like where their hearts are engaged
Mm.
and they can feel the pain of that character and they can feel excited with that character, not to where they get like lost in it, but where they can, yeah, experience empathy for other people as well. And all of these skills that they learn in play and in naming emotion and watching shows, it's like, it's not like I'm thinking throughout the day, oh, I'm going to start to like reflect emotion here and I'm going to watch a show and we're going to talk about that there. Again, when we ourselves can learn the language of emotion, we can become fluent in it to where I'm not thinking about how do I say this sentence in this language. It's just kind of
Mm.
how I operate, and it just becomes a natural part of how we live our life.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think it can become overwhelming to parents when we feel like we have to do it perfectly. Like we want to
Yeah.
protect our kids. We don't want them to end up in therapy because of things we've done or
Yes.
said, or like haven't created a safe space
Mm-hmm.
for them to process their emotions. But are there things that you think parents need to know that are not helpful when it comes to this? Like things that could start to create a wedge in that connection, or things to just watch for if our kids do start sinking back into themselves rather than talking to us about their emotions and what they're feeling?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is this belief that there's good emotions and bad emotions. And I think Inside Out has
Mm.
done a good job of teaching us that that's not true, and removing this fallacy that negative emotions are bad and positive emotions are good. The thing that they find in the emotions research is that actually, if you shut down the bad ones, you shut down the good ones too. Emotions are like a switch.
Mm.
They don't all have these like little switches where you can turn on joy and turn off sadness and turn on excitement, but turn off disappointment. It's just like a big switch. So if you shut down grief and disappointment and pain and hurt, you
Mm.
actually shut down the ability to experience joy and excitement
Wow.
and anticipation. And so if we can just remove the language that, oh, sadness is a bad emotion and joy is a good emotion, because I think we can feel that expectation in our kids and even in ourselves when when we're around people who just want us to be happy all the time. And that's just
Mm.
not real life. Like there has to be
Yeah.
a lot of room to experience the spectrum of emotion, because all of life isn't going to go our way. And like I said, emotional resilience, we want to be resilient. The ability to be able to like bounce back after a setback or bounce back after a disappointment, and not right away. Like sometimes we have to, like, that's what grief is. We have to linger there. We actually have to
Mm.
feel the loss, the grief, the sadness, the disappointment. And that's healthy. Like you question people who experience a loss and they're like good the next day. You're like, I don't actually trust you. The fact that you just lost someone and you're just going back to life as normal. Again, emotions are really vulnerable. And if we don't know how to
Mm.
feel them and express them and be held, we'll just reject them and we'll dissociate from them. And then we can actually no longer access that emotion without being really mindful of it and it being intentional to almost like, yeah, embody that
Mm.
emotion again. We're really smart as a human species. Like we're not going to keep feeling sad if sadness isn't allowed. We're going to move sadness
Mm.
as far away from us as possible. And we're going to use joy to compensate for that. We're just the happiest person in the room and we're always okay all the time. And we're just really resilient and really strong. And sadness isn't just going to like come and move itself back in again. We sometimes actually have to go and seek it out and become embodied with that emotion again.
Honestly, I really do appreciate you being open with your own journey, because you said this has been a decade in the making for you. It's not
Yeah,
like all of a sudden you were like, I know exactly how to do this with my kids. I'm a mom now, and this is how we're going to do it. And
right.
everyone's going to be emotionally intelligent and healthy, and this is going to be great.
Yes.
It is such an ongoing process, and it is vulnerable and it is uncomfortable, especially when you are navigating your own feelings alongside little kids
Yeah.
who really don't understand what they're feeling.
Yeah.
But it is so encouraging to hear your story, because there are so many of us who come from homes and families or relationships where we didn't either have the language to express
Yeah.
what we were feeling, didn't learn, or maybe are still trying to figure out how to reconnect and embody those feelings so that we can now create healthy environments for our kids to feel as well. Like it can just be a lot, but it is possible. And that's what I'm so
Yeah.
thankful that you teach, is that God can do so much
Yeah.
when we open even up the emotional side to him. And I know we talked about this in the episode that you were in last time. Y'all should definitely go back and check that one out because we talk a lot more about how God made us as emotional beings and how we can feel through things and, like kind of that reconnection process. I'd love to know, is there anything else you'd want to say to moms who maybe are coming from that space, feeling like, I don't even know how to do this for myself. How in the world
Yeah.
am I supposed to help my kids be healthy emotionally?
We always start somewhere, right? It's not like you pick up a language the next day. And I
Mm.
think we know that there's a learning process with things like learning an instrument, learning a language, starting a new job. And we give grace to ourselves there. Like, I just got to give myself some time to kind of transition and get used to this, or to learn a language takes so long. But when it comes to our kids, we all of a sudden just put this expectation on us that we need to be perfect and we need to get it right
Mm.
away. Just like with anything, it takes a learning journey, and you're going to be a novice for a really long time. So get comfy there, and just get comfortable, like even being honest with your kids, whether they're little or whether they're teenagers or you have adult children, like being honest, like, hey, I didn't learn this when I was younger. This wasn't something that I was taught. And I think I've made a lot of messes along the way. And I just want you to know that I am on a journey of figuring this out
Mm.
for myself so that I can be a better mom, a better person, a better wife. And I think even I think our kids like to see us human, especially as littles. Like, they just assume that we're just perfect. I remember I even said this to my kids one time. I had a really, really hard day. Everything went wrong that could go wrong. And the day ended with, I forgot to put a lid on top of the popcorn that was popping on the stove. And my son just like had this inkling. It was the Holy Spirit for sure. But he moved my little daughter, who was like 6 months at the time. He just moved her into a different room. And all of a sudden, he starts yelling, the stove is burning. Literally, oil and popcorn all over the kitchen. Thank God my daughter was okay. But just feeling like I had failed as a mom. Like,
Mm.
I was lashing out, just feeling super overwhelmed, in over my head. And I put my daughter to bed. I put my boys to bed because they share a room. And I was like, guys, I just need you to know, like, mommy's not perfect. And both of them literally burst into tears and they're like, you're perfect. Why would you say that you're
Aw.
not perfect? And I had this realization, like, oh my gosh, I have not done a good job of showing you my humanity. Like, I am
Mm.
not perfect. And if you think that I'm perfect, that means when I get it wrong, it's going to hurt really bad. And there's a flip side to this. We can't just like let them see all of us. We have to be
Mm.
use wisdom when it comes to how we disclose and what we let them see. I mean, I work with a lot of clients who had parents who let them see way too much. And so there's
Mm.
you just use the wisdom of the Holy Spirit to kind of help you lean in of like, what is actually enough to share with them so that they can see my humanity, but it not remove their innocence. And
Right.
so I just like, they have to actually see that we are human and that we're getting it
Mm.
wrong and that we're not perfect and we're doing our best to be better versions of ourselves. And so I think that if you were raised in an environment like many of us were, where emotions were not a thing, or maybe they were even really volatile and there was trauma, like, you have to give yourself permission to be a learner and to start
Mm.
from ground zero. And ground zero might be you actually have to go back and do a whole bunch of back work before you can even start building up anything in the first place. Because if you try to put all these skills on top of a foundation that's rooted in trauma and survival
Mm.
mode and people not being safe and other people's emotions feeling really scary, you're going to be trying to put all these skills, but the skills aren't working because they're skills. They work because there's a foundation of trust and wholeness
Mm.
there. And so being able to go back into your own painful past and process, maybe, I mean, most of the work that I do with women is holding space in experiences in their past where nobody validated them, where they got shut down, where they got in trouble for things. A lot of times it goes back to childhood, where they were in their room, they felt angry, they
Mm.
felt misunderstood, but they didn't have those words. They didn't know that they were angry. They
Yeah.
didn't know that they were misunderstood. They didn't know that and they placed all this blame and shame and judgment on themselves. And what happens when experiences aren't processed, especially as children, is we internalize those experiences. We internalize those emotions like shame and guilt and anger, and we bring it and we turn it inwards. And then we basically become that. We become that angry kid, that shut down kid, that rejected kid. And because we
Mm.
have to process pain, research shows with kids, like the way that they heal from painful experiences is by being able to talk about them. I don't know if I shared this last time, but kids, when they get an owie, you hear them talk about that owie over and over and over and over again. And the grocery store clerk is going to hear about that owie. And anybody who they come into, who they encounter is going to hear about that owie, because the brain is actually trying to heal itself through talking
Mm.
and communicating. And
Wow.
yet somehow as adults, we think like, oh, we can just shut that experience down. We just don't talk about that
Mm.
trauma. We don't talk about that thing that happened. We just shut it all down. And all of this unprocessed emotion is like eating us alive. And then we have kids and we think that we're just supposed to do emotion well when we ourselves haven't healed from the painful wounds of our
Right.
past.
That's so good, Chantel. I think that perfectly describes the balance there. And I wanted to take a minute to talk about when it becomes a mental health issue, whether it's for the
Mm,
parent or for the child. Obviously, as the parent, like you said, the responsible, mature person there, at some point there has to be boundaries, right? So at
yeah.
what point do you think we need to, either get help for that for ourselves or even our kids? Like at what point do you think it's no longer just big feelings and it's something,
Yeah.
maybe a trauma, maybe that broken foundation that we actually need to get a little bit more work done on to heal?
Yeah. I think there's like this big self healers movement out there where a lot of influencers and even therapists are talking about how we heal ourselves. And I think there's beauty in it because it's kind of us doing for ourselves what our parents never did for us. But we
Mm,
can't heal in isolation. Like if you try and like
mm,
just make it all your own thing and you go on your own healing, people say it like my healing journey, and I get it, but I hope that in your healing journey you have other people in that space with you and you are not the only mirror that you're looking into, that other people are holding up mirrors for what you can't see, right? Because you think about when you
mm,
look in the mirror, like you can only see the front of you, but community and inviting people into that space is you have mirrors all around you, and so you actually can't unsee yourself. You can't actually refuse to look at certain areas and different blind spots that come up. Like other people are going to be able to see those for you. And so I think we can't talk about when you go to therapy without talking about having other people in your space who can see what you maybe can't see, because we're our
that's
own worst
good.
critics, but we're also our own, we're the ones who can put ourselves into denial. Like we're the only people who can put ourselves into denial. Yes, we can have people shut
Mm,
that down in us, but denial is one of the hardest things to get out of because we actually have to first see, oh my gosh, I'm struggling. Like I'm not doing okay. But I mean, like I'm an achiever. I'm doing okay all the time. And it takes other people in my life to be like, hey, I think I mean, friends literally did this last week. Like, I think you're pushing too hard. I don't think you
yeah.
and your husband are spending enough time together. And I think you need to look at that. I'm probably not going to come to those conclusions myself. I need other people to see what I can't see. When it comes to the discussion of like, when do I actually get help, is who are the people in your life who you could actually ask them, like, hey, this is kind of what I'm going through. Like, am I okay? Like, do you think I need to get help in this area? I mean, even for my kids, like constantly asking friends. Like, I have a son who went through a lot of body trauma when he was little. He's had multiple surgeries.
Mm,
We've been in and out of hospital all throughout his 4 years of life. I've had to ask my friends time and time again, like, do you think that this is normal toddler behavior or do you think this is trauma
mm,
induced? Like I myself as a mom, like I can't actually see the difference. I'm kind of chalking it all up to trauma, but I need to know, like, is there some merit to he's just being a 4-year-old boy and we're going to be okay? Or do I actually need to like go seek help for this? And so I think me getting help in my own issues, like even opening up about my marriage to my friends, like there was a time when I didn't do it with anybody. And then I opened up with a friend. Again, this was pre 2020 when our marriage kind of blew up. And she was like, that is actually really hard. Like, that's not
mm.
okay. And we can just make our life seem like it's okay, but we're just living in survival mode and we don't know it. So we need other people to be able to see our blind spots and be able to help us see what we can't see. But I also just think that there's like this inner knowing that we have sometimes where it's like, like for my son, I was like, I actually know he needs help in this. But I remember describing his situation to somebody on his surgical team, and the guy told me, sounds like you just have a rotten kid and I don't really know what to tell you. And I was like,
Mm,
my inner knowing knows that there's something here. And it's my
yeah.
job as a parent to be able to advocate for my kid when I know that something just feels off. Like there's been I call
Mm.
them our mom stinks. Like they're our instincts, but like they're the instincts that moms have. And we just have this like inner knowing where something is off. This feels like not normal behavior. This feels like not okay. I think I need to reach out for help in this area. And so, one, having community and people who can see our blind spots. Two, trusting those mom stinks, that inner knowing of I think that there's something here and I think I need to go after it. We're never beyond help. As a coach and a counselor, like I have my own coach and counselors in my life. Like
Mm.
I can't be the one at the top who knows all the answers and isn't actually getting my own help. So when we're in a hard season and things just aren't okay and we're just feel like we're coming up against the same thing over and over again, and we ourselves can't get breakthrough in that, it's time to reach out for help. We always say, like, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. Why are we trying to make it happen and invent it ourselves when we could reach out to somebody who's done it before, who can lead us and guide us in a space that we might be stuck in?
That's so good. And I think it's great that you pointed out the community piece is like letting other people into that healing journey is huge because I feel like that's another way that we get modeled for us what healthy emotions
Yeah.
and that healing journey can look like, and that's such a cool way to also model for our kids as well, like letting people into that. Anyway, I just appreciate the way that you have just been in the process yourself
Mhm.
and bringing your kids along with you on the journey. It's just cool to see, like, we don't have to be so stressed and put so much pressure on
Yeah.
ourselves to get it right, because yes, our kids are observing and soaking up so much, but
Yeah.
also, like, again, I just really want to emphasize for myself and other moms who might be listening and just feeling like, oh man, I'm so nervous to screw this up. Like,
Yeah.
there's so much of this emotional development and healing that happens with the restoration piece of this. Like, if you feel disconnected, coming back to that connection point as soon as you can, like as soon as you realize that. But I'd love to know before we go, is there any other advice or encouragement you want to leave with the
Mhm.
moms who are listening?
Research actually shows that we only have to get it right 50% of the time to create a secure attachment in our kids. And
Wow.
when I heard that statistic, I was like, I can get it right 50% of the time. Like I can for sure get a D on this. Like that's what that is, right? Like a 50% is like a D. Like we're not aiming for A here, we're aiming for 50% of the time. But I would say, just to reinforce the repair, we can't underestimate the repair. I don't think I ever was modeled repair growing up. My
Mm,
parents have actually done so much repair with me in the last 2-ish years, and it has
mm.
transformed my childhood. Like, and I'm not just using
Wow.
transformed as like just like a cute word. Like the lens that I see my childhood through is absolutely transformed because of the repair that they are doing with me at 35 years old.
Mm,
And so it's never too late to make a repair, whether your kids are 2, 5, or 15 or 35. It's never too late to make a repair, but the repair is so important. I mean, when we experience pain, it cracks a door open in our soul, and the repair shuts that door. Us as the
mm.
parents, like we're responsible to help our kids shut that door so that the enemy can't come in and whisper those lies like, see, that was your fault. See, you're not wanted. See, your sister is better than you. We are supposed to help them shut those doors that maybe we opened ourselves. Maybe it was kids on the playground, maybe it was other kids, maybe it was a teacher, but the processing and the repair is helping them shut that door. And the beautiful thing about God is that he restores things that we can't see. And so he's ultimately their
Mm.
parent, the number one parent. And he assigned me to be their earthly parents, but I'm just a human in a human body with a human will and a soul that's not going to get it right. And God knows that. Like, he's not up there being like, oh Lord, she got it wrong again. Like, he is
Right.
fully aware of the fact that, like, I'm human and he picked me. And I think that's what I would say too. Like, God picked you to be your kid's parent. He knew exactly what kind of kid he was giving you, and he picked you out of all the parents in the world. I tell this to my kids all the time. Like, we get to pick everybody else in our life. We get to pick our friends, we get to pick our spouse, but the person that we don't get to pick is our parents. God picks
Mm.
those for us because he thinks in and of himself that we were good enough for the job. And so, starting off with that, like, you are the perfect parent for your kid. You only have to get it right 50% of the time, and the repair of where you get it wrong will do infinitely more than you can even understand. You might not see it now, what the repair will do, but over time, over decades, you will realize how much trust you repairing with your kids is going to build.
I love that. I love this conversation so much. And like I said, you guys definitely go back to episode 41 if you want more of this. So good. But Chantelle, will you tell everybody where they can connect with you and learn more from here?
Yes. You can find me on Instagram daily. Sometimes I want to be off there, but my business depends on being on Instagram. So I'm at Chantelle E. Nelson. I have a membership program called Thrive where we come together every Friday. I teach, I coach, I invite guests, and it's just literally for women who are tired of living in survival mode and want to thrive in every season of their life. I open up the doors 4 times a year. And so the doors actually open September 7th, Friday, September 7th. So if you want to join, you can be a part of that. Yeah, my website's comealivelifecoaching.com. You can find more information about my programs and one-on-one coaching there, but Instagram is probably the best place to find me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, y'all. I'll make sure everything is linked for you. But I just love you, friend. I'm so grateful for you and for everything you've taught me personally just from following along with you and having these conversations. And I just look up to you so much as a mom and a friend and just woman who's on this journey to be emotionally well the way that God created us to be. So thank you so much for your time, for being here with us.
Thanks, friend.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tune into another episode of the Byword Show. I love having you here, and I am truly so thankful for your support. Don't forget to share a screenshot of this episode to let me know you were here, and quick favor, if you enjoyed this episode, would you take a second to leave a review? It really helps our community grow. If you want more, you can shop my books Waking Up and Love Is at thehannahhughes.com or on Amazon, and be sure to join my email list for all the latest news. I can't wait to chat again soon, but in the meantime, be sure to come connect with me on social media, and remember, I'm cheering you on.